Hello and welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, the ultimate resource for HR insights and guidance that will empower both seasoned business professionals and eager job seekers. I'm HR Kyle, your host. I'm excited to embark on this journey with you. In each episode, we'll delve into the intricacies of HR management, uncovering strategies that can transform the way you approach talent acquisition, employee engagement, and workplace dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned HR pro navigating the ever-evolving landscape of human resources or a job seeker striving to land your dream position, this podcast is your compass. Our mission is simple: to provide you with actionable knowledge, expert interviews, and inspiring stories that will help you thrive in the world of HR. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to take your HR game to the next level. Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, where HR meets success. Thank you for tuning in today. If you listened to our first episode, we certainly appreciate you joining us again this week. If this is your first time tuning in, we're certainly glad you've taken the time to listen to us. We think we've got something unique and engaging to offer to you. A little bit about me. I've been in HR now for the past 25 years and had an opportunity to work in all facets of the human resources field. I've also had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different professionals in my career. I'll bring all of that experience to bear on the HR Kyle podcast. Let's talk a little bit about how each episode breaks out. There are two segments to each episode. In segment one, I'll present on a topic that I think is beneficial to our audience, whether you're a business leader, a job seeker, or both. In segment two, we'll have a guest join us. They'll have a unique story or perspective to share with our audience, and again, it's something that we think will be beneficial to you. So whether you're a business leader looking to enhance your employee experience or a job seeker hoping to reach your full potential, we think we've got something special for you. Let's take a quick break so you can learn more about HR Kyle's services, and we'll be back after this. Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business. Welcome back to the HR Kyle podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Welcome to segment one of this episode. Last week, we talked you through the interview experience, providing guidance and direction to better prepare you for the verbal and nonverbal aspects of a job interview. We called it acing that first interview. Today, we'll explore these added details to consider before, during, and after that interview. Keep in mind, too, these are all based upon recent experiences I've had with job candidates. So before the interview, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you is know where you're going and how long it takes to get there. Be sure, though, that those directions are taken at the time that you'll actually be driving to the interview. And on top of that, add at least 15 to 20 minutes to that drive time. Where did this advice come from? Let me tell you a quick story. Had a candidate interview, it's been a couple of months ago now. And he did a really nice job the night before the interview of doing the driving directions. Unfortunately, his interview was the next morning at 8 o'clock and not the night before at 9 p.m. As Probably imagine rush hour traffic had an effect. Needless to say, this young man was 20 minutes late for his interview. And this is where I always ask the question, what do you think that young man was called after the interview? Like, what name did I give him after the interviews were all over with? Still unemployed because he did not get the job offer. Being 20 minutes late for an interview, regardless of the circumstance, is unacceptable. So, again, get those driving directions. Make sure that you look at the time you'll actually be driving to the interview so you can account for any other traffic disruptions. And again, add another 20 minutes on top of whatever time that the driving directions provide. Number two, prepare all your clothing materials the day before and don't be afraid to overdress. No one ever walked into an interview and said, "Oh my gosh, you're overdressed for this. We're not going to offer you the job." But plenty of people have walked into an interview underdressed and not been offered the position. Many times the interviewer will look at your mode of dress and determine how you'll be as a person. And if you're underdressed, a lot of people interpret that as being disrespectful to the circumstance. But again, have those clothes ready the night before. The last thing you want to do is pull out an outfit and realize that it needs ironed or it's got a little stain. If you do that the morning of the interview or an hour before the interview, you do not have enough time to recover. So again, prepare your clothes the night before. Three, please do final research on your company that you're interviewing with and the job opportunity. When you apply for every job, be sure that you take a screen print of the job opportunity. That way, if the position is later deleted or falls off a website or you're not able to get access to it for some reason, you still have that screen print that you can refer back to, again, to do your research. But again, research the company, research the job opportunity. I can guarantee you, and if you tuned in last week, you understand why that research is so important. But I guarantee you, those pieces of information about the company, about the job opportunity are going to come up during the interview. And quite frankly, if you're an effective interviewer, like we talked about last week, you're going to reference things about the job opportunity. You're going to represent things about or reference things about the company throughout your job interview. So do that preparation. I always say anyone who's not doing research about the company and the job opportunity is simply being lazy, especially in this day and age of the internet and having these tools literally right at your fingertips to do a quick search. Number four, before the interview, do a walkthrough of the interview. Practice your intro. Think about some of the basic questions that you'll be asked, and then think about your closing. And again, if you're not familiar with what we talked about in episode one, please go back and review that because these are all parts of the interview that we talked about, and I provided some guidance for you in order to be effective. But again, you still want to practice your intro, your response to basic questions, and your closing to be sure that it's a smooth answer, that it's concise, and that it's complete. And you're talking about everything that you want to talk about. There's no worse feeling than leaving an interview, thinking back to the questions that you were asked and realizing, oh, I could have given a better answer than I gave. Don't do that. Do your prep in advance, and those type of things are much, much less likely to happen. So let's talk about guidance during the interview. Again, I mentioned about adding 20 minutes to your drive time. Please make sure you arrive at least 10 minutes early to every interview. Again, referring back to past experience, I've had so many candidates either arrive on time, think they were, and then they're late. Unfortunately, when you arrive on time for an interview, at least the time that you were scheduled, you're already running late because that takes time to check in as a visitor. In most facilities, you have to be walked to the room where the interview is taking place. So there's a lot more delay that's happening. That 10 minutes early allows the check-in for visitor protocols. It allows you to be walked to the interview location or boardroom or conference room, wherever that's taking place, so that the interview itself can start on time. On the flip side, never arrive too early. There's nothing that's more of a put off than having a candidate who arrives 20, 25, and 30 minutes early. That doesn't make the kind of impression that you want it to make. What it does is it puts pressure on the hiring team or the interviewer to rush through what they already are doing in order to meet you because they don't like it that you're sitting out in the lobby waiting. So again, 10 minutes appears to be, or at least from my perspective, is that sweet spot. of when to arrive early and not too early. Here's the other thing. Even if you've submitted resumes already and your work examples or what have you, still bring copies of your resume and also please bring copies of your work examples. Again, if you refer back to episode 1, we talked about the STAR approach, and we talked about being able to tell stories and prove what the claims that you're making about your knowledge, skills, and experience. Well, those work examples are going to do that for you. So have copies of work examples that are relevant to the interview that you're participating in. And remember last time, answer all questions using the STAR approach. Quick reminder, the STAR approach is talking about the situation or task, the action you took, and the result of that action. And please don't forget the R. And remember, the R needs to have a bang to it. So whatever that action was that led result, make sure it ties back to the job that you're interviewing for. Also, during the interview, get business cards of who you're meeting with. Remember what we talked about last time. There's two reasons why you're doing that. The main reason, at least at the moment, is to have those cards in front of you so you use everyone's name. Because why? People like to hear their names. So when you're meeting with that interviewer and you say, yes, Mr. Smith, this is what I did, or yes, Mrs. Smith, this is what I did, or thank you, Mrs. Smith, you're using that person's name. It allows you to make that connection. Again, having the cards in front of you enables you to remember their names throughout the interview. And remember what I said last time, there's $1 million question. Why is it $1 million question to ask at the end? Because people get jobs that are worth $1 million or more by asking this question. So it's the $1 million question. I talked about it the first episode, but it's so good that I'm going to throw it in here again. It's this question. Is there anything, Mr. Smith, that would make you hesitate to consider me for this job? And you know what you do when after you ask that question? You wait for their answer. Again, tune into episode 1 to hear more of the guidance around that question. But again, please don't forget to ask that question at the end of your interview. Also, shake hands and say thank you at the conclusion of each interview. Also, make sure you're standing up when you're shaking hands. So many candidates anymore, for some reason, don't do these little details of shaking hands and saying thank you for the interview. But those are the kind of things that can oftentimes set you apart from other candidates. So I want to make sure you do those because, again, let's not forget our goal here. Our goal is to obtain the job that we're interviewing for. Otherwise, we shouldn't be interviewing. And even if you're not interested in the position after talking with the interviewer, you still are out to make a good impression because they may well recommend you for another job that either they're familiar with or someone in their network. So again, this is as much about networking and making connections and building your worth and demonstrating your worth. So please stand up, shake hands, and say thank you at the conclusion of the interview. One other thing, and this is a big one after the interview. Now remember, I mentioned before at the start of this segment, these are based upon real examples that I've encountered over the past about a year or so. After the interview, please send thank you notes. I put on here send thank you notes within 48 hours, but gosh, if you could send those within 24 hours, you know what's even more impressive? If you send it the moment you get home or you get back to work after your interview and you send a thank you note to those that you interviewed with. And again, remember, it's all the people you interviewed with. And you know how you know their email addresses? Because during the interview, you grabbed their business cards. That's another reason why you're grabbing the business cards, so you can send the thank you notes afterwards. So again, I mentioned about experiences and what drove this list and why I'm providing this guidance today. So here's a recent example where this thank you notes really came into play. We had two candidates, right? Same position they're being considered for. On paper and during the interview process, they were in a tie. It was a dead heat between the two candidates. We could have gone either way, but there was one deciding factor. One candidate sent thank you notes, the other one didn't. Guess what we called the candidate that sent the thank you notes? We called them a new hire because we hired them and we did not consider the candidate who didn't send the thank you notes because quite frankly that was a deciding factor. Again, it was all tied up leading into that. So again, before and how you're prepping for the interview during, and how you're conducting yourself in the interview. And then there's the after. So it's the complete package. Why is it the complete package? Because when I'm doing the hiring, I'm looking for someone who offers the complete package. So again, there you have it, interview guidance for before, during, and after. I promised that to you last week. Wanted to close the loop on this and conclude segment one by saying, please follow my advice. If you haven't listened to episode one yet, please do that so you can have the full picture and ace that next job interview. Looking ahead to next week, we're going to be talking about building a talent pipeline. So if you're an HR professional or a business professional in general, and you're struggling with hiring and recruiting and so on, you're going to want to tune into this one. Building a talent pipeline. This is based upon years of experience. And to give you a little peek behind the curtain before we get into next week, I can tell you right now, it's based upon my concept of approaching recruitment and hiring as a sales and marketing function. So there's a little peek at next week, building a talent pipeline. I hope you'll tune in for that. Otherwise, let's conclude segment one and say thank you for tuning into this part of the show. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to go to segment two where we have a special guest joining us today.
Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business.
Welcome to segment two. This is one of my favorite segments of the show where we have a guest come in and talk to us about topics, again, that are relevant to HR professionals, business professionals, and job seekers. Today, we're fortunate to have our guest, Becki, join the show. Becki is currently a career specialist at a nonprofit that helps high school students who typically would have barriers and obstacles to employment. She helps them get started out and get their employment history started out successfully. Becki, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kyle.
Becki, let's start off today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story a little bit. You've got a story of really working through a career transition that I think a lot of our listeners would be curious to hear more about. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, as you said, I am a career specialist going into the high schools at this time. I transitioned from the classroom teaching, which I did for 27 years. I also worked in the business world, another 15, so I have over 40 years of actually in the education field. I do have my master's degree as well as obviously my bachelor's degree. And I've kind of just been working in education throughout all these years, but in different aspects in the business and education fields.
Okay. And you said it was 24 years and 18 years. What were the numbers again?
27 in the classroom
Okay.
and about 15 in the business world, but still
Okay.
in the education field.
Okay, great. So if people are doing math out there, they could determine your age at this point. So thank you for sharing that. No,
You're
we're
quite
kidding.
welcome.
Yeah. So Becki, first question really to kick us off today. You're currently a career specialist, as you mentioned, but that hasn't always been your profession. What did you do before this, and how does it relate to what you're doing now? And I know you said you were a teacher, but help us understand a little bit more in detail about that.
Right. My 27 years, about half of those were in the middle school area, which could be anywhere from sixth to eighth grade. And not just focusing on the content area, but I focused on getting jobs. It was very important to me that students understood that getting a job required obviously an education beyond high school, and having the skills to graduate high school. So when I came across this job, it was exactly what I wanted to do because I help students graduate, and with the graduation requirements, I can get them a job while they're in high school, and then we also look at their career possibilities for after high school.
Okay, wonderful. Now, obviously, a very admirable profession that you're involved in. Obviously, you have a strong interest in helping kids, especially those maybe that would be considered a little less privileged, or certainly that have some barriers in their life to having a successful future. But all that being said, you could have retired after 42 years of working. Why not? Why didn't you?
Well, the biggest reason is I didn't want to stop working. I just wanted to continue working. I wanted to go into a different type of education and continue to work with students. But I just really wanted to keep working.
Yeah, no, and obviously there's a passion there too to work with high school students, to work with students in what we call at HR Kyle student success. That's an important theme in our world at HR Kyle Services. But speaking of that, I work with a lot of candidates who are going through what you went through, and that's a career transition. So they've been in this one career for a number of years and they're ready to make a change.
Right.
But we all know that can be very tough. It can be very frustrating. In many ways, it can be a struggle. What were some of the hard lessons that you learned working through that process that you can share with our listeners?
Kyle, I've been trying to transition in out of the classroom and into another position for years, probably even a decade. The frustrations were that corporations didn't think that a teacher could actually train adults. A lot of the questions that I got were, "Have you ever trained adults?" Because they saw me as only teaching children. They weren't able to see how my skills would transfer from younger students to adults. Some of them were just having issues with trying to work around a teacher schedule versus, do you want to work full time? Well, I was working full time. I just happened to be only working from 7:30 to 3 o'clock. So those are some of the issues and frustrations that I came across as I was trying to transition.
But you were successful because you did land a position that's outside of teaching. How did that happen?
Well, I had decided that I was going to go a different direction. I was kind of looking into like instructional design, training, and then I thought, what about recruiting? Because I still could use the skills that I was helping my students in middle school with getting jobs, focusing on soft skills, and as you were talking about earlier, working on interviews, the interview process. And so I just researched and I started looking for jobs. As you might say, I went through the yellow pages on my phone, and I got to about the 14th or 15th one when I scrolled down, and it was the job that I have now. And I read what they were about, and it just really sounded interesting in what I wanted to do.
Okay, wonderful. So through that though, and as you mentioned, a year, then you said it maybe as long as 10 years, that transition obviously took some time, whatever that is. How did you stay resilient through that period of time and not just after 6 months or 8 months say, forget it, I'm stuck where I am. I'm not gonna make this transition.
It was tough, and it's not that I didn't feel that way. There were many times, I mean, I would cry sometimes and just get really upset that the companies couldn't see how my skills would transfer over to a training job or a instructional designing job, and it got extremely frustrating. So I would do it for about 4 to 6 months, and I would look, and then I'd stop for a while, and then I would get my confidence back up again, and I'd start again. And I probably really did this for about 10 years.
Hmm. No, thanks for, but again, you stuck with it. You didn't give up. There were some down points but you kept pushing forward.
Right.
Looking back now, what would you do different? Would you do anything different in your search so maybe it wouldn't have taken so long?
A couple of different things. I probably, again, would look outside of the training area because teaching and training, they do go hand in hand, but I would probably get away from those words and start researching what I did with the recruiting and kind of go out of the box in different areas. Um, I also would look locally. I think I was using a lot of Indeed, Monster, and I really believe that this position was meant for me to have because it was local. It was, it's 10 minutes from my house, and I was able to pick up a phone and call somebody and say, "Hey, I just applied, and I'd like to talk more about the position." I think that's what did it this time.
Wonderful. Well, Becki, last question for today, and probably as meaningful as anyone we're going to ask during this segment, because again, we have people tuning in that are where you were a year or 2 years ago that are starting to get a little frustrated working through this transition. For those listeners, especially, what advice would you give someone wanting to transition to a new career?
Well, as I previously mentioned, I would just do it the old fashioned way, whether that means taking your resume and walking into a business, stay local. There are so many places out there anymore that are hiring. Take your resume, walk into a business, talk to the hiring person, do your application online if you need to do that, and then call them and contact them, which is not something I did in the past. And I was able to do this time because the job was local.
Well, and I think here I said that was our last question, but maybe I lied there for a second. I don't know if this is a question or a statement, but I think there's a lesson here too for those in the business world, those in a hiring position, and possibly in an HR position. Think outside the box. When you look at candidates, look for transferable skills. Look for that professionalism that you're seeking in these positions. Don't be so locked in prior job titles, and don't be so locked in and going by that job description word by word, so that you eliminate candidates such as Becki who have those transferable skills to be an effective trainer because she's done that for her entire career. Becki, what else would you say to business professionals out there, the HR professionals and the hiring managers that I was just speaking to? Is there anything else that you would tell them?
That's exactly, and you and I have talked about that many times, and you have helped me with my resume to turn those words into something that would relate to the business world. But again, I had to put my work experience on there, which only, in quotation marks, only included my teaching. And so I don't know that it's a good thing to leave the work experience off your resume, but they could go through all of those details of the words that you and I changed when you were working with me on my resume. And once they see that work experience, I think that that's probably what stopped them.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And again, that's short sighted, especially in this day and age when we talk about candidate shortages and not being able to find qualified candidates. There are qualified candidates out there. You just have to look a little bit closer.
Right.
Well, Becki, I want to thank you for joining us today. Certainly great having you on the HR Kyle podcast. Appreciate you sharing your story and your experiences. Even some of them that were probably a little bumpy, a little hard to relive, but you came out on the other side. It's definitely a success story, and I'm glad that you could share it with our listeners today.
Thank you so much, Kyle. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the HR Kyle podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed making it. These are always fun to share and learn and grow. And every episode, I think I learn a few things as well. So you're going to hear a closing remark here that's going to ask you to subscribe and tune into us. I hope that you'll do that. And again, if you haven't listened to episode one, go back and listen to that as well. I think you'll find some valuable information there also, not only from the presentation I gave on interviews, but we had a wonderful guest last time talking about starting her career and some of the frustration she went through. Otherwise, be sure to tune in to us next week for episode 3 of the HR Kyle podcast, where again, we'll have segment 1, where we provide some valuable information that we think you'll benefit from. And then segment 2, we're going to have another special guest. So until next time, take care.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.